Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'll call this budget committee meeting to order. We do have a quorum. Would y'all please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. I don't see any changes to the agenda, like correct? Correct. Thank you. Okay, at this time, we need to appoint a budget committee chair and vice chair. Entertain nominations.
You're interested in being chair next year this year?
I'll make a motion to nominate Patty Lasky as the budget committee chair.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded for Patty Maskey to be the budget chair. Any other nominations?
Any other volunteers?
You know what happens if you don't volunteer, we have to shut the doors and bring in the security dog. It's calling up to bite an ankle.
What does that position require, vice?
Pardon?
Which is the vice, which is that position?
Vice chair, is that what you said? You just take over if the chair misses the meeting. You run it and tell us all what to do and
Oh, boy.
live happily ever after.
With lots of lovely prompting and, goodwill. So it's not a hard job.
No.
Okay, seeing or hearing no other nominations for chair, can we go ahead and vote for chair? And we'll go on to the vice chair. All in favor of Patty Lasky being our chair for this year, please raise your hand. Any hand will work. Thank you very much. That means my job's done. Patty, you take over. Now we need a vice chair.
So do we have any nominations for a vice chair? No. Or if anybody will nominate somebody for a vice chair? No,
I have it.
okay, I motion Shelley Swift as vice chair. Yeah,
I'll make a second.
second. All right. Any others? And all in favor?
First.
Thank you. So we move on to receive the budget message. John or?
Yep. You just go over it.
Good afternoon. 25-26 fiscal year budget message. 25-26 school budget is designed to meet the overall needs of the students in the Greensport School District. It is presented as required by ORS 294.305 through 294.520. In developing this budget, the school district reestablishes a focus on supporting students, staff, and schools in achieving successful outcomes. This budget is based on the first year of the 25-27 state school fund estimated allocation of $11.4 billion with a 49-51% split. The extended ADMW for the district decreased from 784.8 from the 24-25 year for an overall state school fund allocation estimate of $6,281,123.96. Revenue estimates for the general fund project our resources at $10,725,178 for the coming fiscal year, as compared to $9,868,889 for the current year. This represents an increase of $856,289, which can be attributed to the restoration of the beginning fund balance and one-time federal forest reimbursement. While the statewide trend in funding has had dramatic impacts all around the state, the Newport has adjusted its budget to meet new demands, with fewer resources from the state. Budget proposed tonight will allow the district to continue the pursuit of better student outcomes with a responsible ending fund balance and several built-up reserves as directed by the school board. After unexpectedly furloughing 8 days in the school year 23-24 and depleting reserves, we've worked to both support our staff and students of our community within a sustainable budget while actively saving and rebuilding these reserves. Tonight's budget shows a $1 million ending fund balance, which is an improvement of $566,708 from last year. We used many reductions in programs, staffing, and services to achieve this goal, staying focused on our student and staffing needs. The furlough indirectly put our student in a reset. From that point, we have worked our way forward. Speculation at the federal level currently has created concern at the state level about education funding sources for the coming year and biennium. Despite a solid state school fund proposal from the governor and support from the legislature, there is a projected decrease in some funding necessary for schools through the State School Success Act, State Success Act, and the student investment accounts. We're watching the state and federal government closely as we begin to plan for next year's spending. Our approach for next year is to be cautious about any spending until we have either a high level of guarantee or we have the money currently deposited. We're beginning the second year of rebuilding the budget in unappropriated ending fund balance and contingency funds for emergencies. We'll be looking to return to the $1 billion ending fund balance this year, along with the board directed $500,000 contingency fund. This is to ensure the district once again has a strong financial foundation with $1 million in general fund reserves by the end of 25-26. After school year operating under reduced revenues, we've been able to reorganize staff positions while maintaining services to our students. We will continue to look for opportunities to bring back work to our staff in our buildings. Keeping our students in the school district and supporting them locally is another focus of the work and reflected in our budget planning. This budget is founded on the fiscal development of our district programs and commitment to ensure academic and social success of all our students and empowerment of our staff. It is educationally sound, fiscally responsible, and in compliance with statute. I appreciate the support, participation, and input provided by the community, families, district staff, and school board members in the collaborative budget presented.
Thank you, John. Have any questions?
Oh, I had one. Wouldn't you think that you would get the federal funding? About, I know, we're,
It's all speculation. We're just watching things closely and making any adaptations as it's necessary. The only thing that we're seeing right now is that $44 million reduction in the state school fund, Student Success Act, from the Student Success Act. So right now, that's all we're planning on. There's still some other things we're worried about, but we're going to be cautious in our spending until we know or realize that those are worries no longer.
So moving on to the proposed budget presentation and discussion. Which one, Josh?
Hi, since we have new budget committee members this year, could we perhaps do some introductions?
Oh, absolutely. How about we start with Josh? And then we'll go. Because so they know.
Hello, everyone. I'm Josh. I'm the Assistant Business Manager. I will be doing the presentation and answering most of the questions tonight.
And I'm Rachel Amos. I'm the business manager. I'm just here for moral support.
I'm Missy Watts. I'm the vice principal at Highland Elementary School.
I'm Robin Haddock. I am the special programs director.
Jerry, you're high school principal.
Sheila Marshall, committee member.
Jerry Hamner. Wanda Smith. Community member.
Shelley Swift, Budget Committee member. Patty Lasky, Budget Committee member. And
Carrie Oldright, committee member, budget committee member, and school board member.
Terry Jones, School Board Chair.
Ward, school board member. Jack Ennis, school board member. I'm John Zwemke, the superintendent. Bonnie Boer is on the screen in the bottom left-hand corner as board member and also our 10th member. Thanks for the way, Bonnie.
Hi, everybody.
thank you.
Bonnie.
Well, thank you, everyone. And Josh,
Okay, let me get this shared. It should show up. Cool. Okay, 25-26 proposed budget. Wow. Okay. The budget is the district's financial roadmap for the upcoming fiscal year. And especially why we say roadmap is, as John mentioned, we are going into a biennium. It is really hard to project what is going on. We get estimations throughout the year, but the governor still has not set their budget. So that's why we are working off an estimated 11.4 billion. There's been talk, that's the goal for us to get to for our state school fund, but it hasn't been set yet. So we're doing our best to plan with the information that we have. So it includes estimated costs of goods and services and estimations of our resources. Was a budget required by law? Taxpayers fund schools, requiring our district to be accountable and transparent in its spending plans. Transparency and accountability are facilitated by budget law through uniform procedures, independent committee members, public meetings, and public participation. The role of the budget committee: review the budget document and receive the budget message. Provide opportunity for public input. Members of the public can ask questions and or make comment about the proposed budget. Public can make suggestions to budget committee as they relate to the goals and programs of the district. Approve the budget and refer it to the district board for adoption. And the budget committee is subject to public meeting laws. There's one more slide and then I'll have questions about the role of CAN. Was the budget committee not do? Budget committee does not set salaries, benefits, or contract terms for employees or administrators. The budget committee does not set staffing levels. Budget committee does not decide whether or not a service or program should be provided. And the budget committee does not make district policies. Any additional questions on the roles of the budget committee? Can the committee change the budget? The committee has the authority to change the superintendent's proposed budget within the limitations specified in the previous two slides. After the committee approves the proposed budget and refers it to the board also has the authority to change the approved budget. There are two limitations placed on the board. If the board increases expenditures in a fund by more than 10%, then the budget must go through a supplemental budget process. The board does not have the authority to increase taxes approved by the committee. This is just a list of all the funds, and we'll get into more of that. These are the projected revenue by funds. So the general fund is where the district has the most flexibility. Special revenue funds are made up of state, local, and federal grants, as well as some of our reserve funds for capital projects, curriculum, or other determined funds that we may have money set aside for. Debt service funds are for bonds. Capital building fund. That one is, as it sounds, it's for capital improvements, building. Proprietary fund. That fund is made up of the new paid family medical that started the year prior. And then fiduciary funds are like scholarships and trusts that. Any questions on this slide? Here is a breakdown of our general fund revenue. So there is a couple things that I will touch on. Federal funding, 252,428. That is a one-time money the district is going to be receiving. That's typically where our force fees go. There's still been no changes. We aren't projecting federal force fee money. The reason why we're getting this, and this was released a little while ago. There was a mess up in the calculation in the state school fund. So they messed that up.
16 and on.
Yeah, 2015 and on. For a few years, they made some errors. They finally discovered that. And now Reedsport is owed at 252. So it's not a yearly amount we're gonna get. This is just them making right what they previously made mistakes on.
Is that more or less than we have been getting on the average in the past?
On average, we get about 60. Yeah,
Do you wanna,
Who oversees that gets done? This is, they just received $6.6 million and nobody said anything. County bringing school districts.
it's not the same thing.
yeah, that's different. And I know we were talking about that a little bit in the board meeting, and I haven't had time to look into that more yet. This is just the federal forest that we had been receiving.
And Josh, you want to clarify the future of those funds?
Yeah, the future of them is Oregon's no longer set to be receiving them at this point.
It was a federal funding program that they let expire, so that's no longer, we're no longer getting that $60,000 in forest fees annually.
So unfortunately, we won't even be able yet to rely on that $60,000 forward. State school fund. You will have heard that John's budget message, it was like 6.28 million. On here, I have 6.2 million. That is because the state school fund, for example, this year, we started at almost the same, 6.286. And as we received updates from ODE, the latest one being on 4/29, as more information comes in, they get more actuals and stuff. They determined our actual state school fund estimate was 6,016,000. So a 270,000 difference from where they projected us from the beginning. And then they still do a adjustment the year following as they continue to get more actuals. So since Reedsport has had a declining in, I wanted to budget a little below that, help maybe kind of plan ahead for that decrease like we saw this year. I hope it not to be to that, but I didn't see it responsible to budget for the number when we're seeing a trend of it changing negative. One other new piece on there is indirect. School districts have the authority to charge an indirect rate on grants. That indirect is basically an administrative fee. And what that does is in short, kind of transfers money from the grant to the general fund. So instead of having to be held to the specifics of a grant, we have more flexibility in the general fund to use that money. Any questions about the general fund revenues? This is the expenditures as a whole. We will go over these a little more separately in the slides moving forward. But you can kind of see, it just gives a representation of where most of our money is. At the bottom is salaries. The one just above that is the associated payroll costs with salaries. So that's benefits and just taxes and everything, like whatever portion of taxes and all of that. Those make up the majority of the general fund expenditures. Okay. Yeah. Touching on salaries and benefits again. They make up a combined 6.7 million, which is about 63% of our total general fund expenditures. That is an increase of 1.1 million from last year. I think it's about an 8 or 9% increase as well. So part of what caused those increases was benefits. PERS had to do a increase on the amount that is contributed. So Reedsport pays employee PERS. So they increased it initially 6.98%. They just changed it right before the budget meeting here, right before I prepared this document. So it ended up in an average of 5.1% increase in the PERS contribution rates, which was roughly last year. PERS cost the district $635,000. This year it's $888,000, so $250,000 difference. Any questions on that side? Purchase services, they make up about 17% of the general fund budget. And you can see some examples of what they include. They include our bills, electrical, plumbing, heating, cooling, postage, legal service, transportation. And that is almost a $600,000 less difference than last year. The big part of that is Reed Sport is no longer going to be paying for services from South Coast for their life skills and is bringing it in-house.
Say that again, John.
So South Coast ESD provides services to districts if they so choose. And one of them was their life skills program, special education. And they, instead of paying for those services, they're bringing people in-house, provide the services here in the district. So it's almost 600,000 less we'll be paying for purchase services because of that.
That's new hires.
That is more of HR's department, so I can't speak to that specifically. There's still potentially recall and stuff like that, so that I can't, that's more of HR's world.
How many positions is it?
Still to be determined, and again, staffing isn't really the budget committee's purview. So that'll be more of John and the special education department to figure out.
And
But again, a cost savings of,
Almost 600,000 in purchase services.
How come your numbers and what you're giving us right now isn't reflected in the subjects in our budget booklet?
It's hard to get it out of the booklet because this is for 300 object code in the general fund. So it doesn't summarize it that way in the budget.
Well, what good is the budget book for us to take home and study then?
That's a good question.
Start the fire in the morning with?
It does it more line by line, which is why I do this for you guys to show it in a different light.
maybe he asked the question, but I didn't understand it. The 600,000 that you said we're saving for the purchase of, for the non-purchase now of,
Life skills.
okay, is that indicated here?
That is indicated, yeah, in this category specifically, purchase services.
Okay, but where would it fall on the left-hand side there? What,
That was just an example. If I listed all of our purchase services, it would be very,
but 600,000 is what, a third of the budget in that amount?
well, is a third of purchase services of our overall general fund budget of 10.7 million. It's 5.5%.
So what Josh is saying is that our purchase services in the general fund this year equate to $1.8 million. And in the current year's budget, it was $600,000 or more higher than that. Budget savings. So that's not indicated in that 1.8. That's just the total of what
and
it is right now.
you have life skills, for example, you have life skills proposed 25, 26 at 175,000, correct?
In there, yeah, that is also for, that was a little bit of a placeholder and it's still kind of a life skills program, but they still have to order services like K-12, like speech and stuff like that. So there's still some services that we need from the district, but life skills on its own, I mean, last year, what was that? 670 or more thousand budgeting? What page was it? Where are you looking on?
22, 23 was 689. 23, 24 was 645 and 24, 25 is 609. I'm on page 24.
Josh, go ahead and answer that.
No, I'm
Sorry.
Yeah, so yeah, you'll still see an allocation for some of those K-12. But, and I have it on the LSP order here. Life skills cost us 515,000 last year. But our purchase services is down almost 600,
Which is primarily from life skills.
which is primarily from life.
And so where was the other monies allocated to from that savings?
So the 75,000, I have to look at it line by line to be able, it could be a couple thousand here and there.
Out of the 600,000 savings, 175 is going to the program. Am I correct?
I don't know about out of the savings, but 175 is still available to go to.
To the program. And that would include whatever hires were made, correct?
No, hires will come out of salaries and benefits.
Okay, so that's out of another category.
Yep.
So then, the additional 525,000, where was that allocated to?
I mean, overall, I don't say like this one is specifically for here. It was allocated to our ending fund balance, transfers, or other expenses. I don't necessarily have like, this expenditure increased this, specifically. It is to the overall health of the budget. That allocated where needed.
Those placeholders are something we have to get comfortable with.
Yeah.
I imagine you would have reallocated some of it into salaries to cover those positions that are gonna come in, or maybe not come in, but move over.
Correct,
To that.
correct.
And the purging.
Increase.
And if you look if you look at page 26, that's kind of it gives you kind of I try and ballpark with my eyeballs. But when you go from your previous budgets and you see a little bit of jump, that's the transmission of those funds into in-house salaries. So that's where you see it.
Yeah, the next page is perfect. Is a great representation of it. More questions on that slide? Supplies and materials. Looking at about 271,250, about 2.5% of our general fund budget. That includes maintenance supplies, classroom supplies, athletic, computer software and hardware. Any questions on that slide? Capital outlay in our general fund, we don't have any expected expenditures. That usually comes more out of our capital fund, our 400 fund. And that's last year was the same for Reed Sport. So just out of our general fund, we don't typically plan those types of expenditures. Dues and fees. 227,859. Of general funds.
Which number is that on?
Page number?
No, well, either, where would we find?
Fund number 100, 400.
Oh, object number is gonna be the 600s. So if you see 06 something, that'll be dues and fees. And this is in relation to just the general fund, this number. So those. Not too many of them. I'm not sure one might be on a page.
38, 39, that's 600 budget.
38 and 39.
But that proposal is important.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Think I'm ready to phone the light on.
Was it, did somebody throw out a page number?
Yeah, 38, 39, 40. It's like 41, there's some object expenditures there.
So the slides that Josh is covering right now are rolls up of the general fund in total. So the first slide was salaries, which are all the 100 object codes within Fund 100. The next was benefits, which is all of the 200 object codes within Fund 100. So it's every page in the budget for Fund 100 and so forth. This is all the 600 object codes. Specific line items and questions in the budget, they'll answer on other slides based on questions that came in from the budget committee. So this is just an overall, these are the sums that make up the whole general fund, and they're not attributable to one specific page number in the budget. It's all of the general fund budget expenditures in and of themselves.
Any questions on this slide? This is the ending fund balance we are projecting. Contingency requires board approval. And then unappropriated, untouchable without a supplemental budget. Okay. There are some questions I received. So I'll go ahead and answer these real quick and then we'll get into other questions. So one was about the teacher experience. And that's going to be in reference to page 11. In the top left box at the bottom of it, you'll see experience adjustment. So this has to do with Reed Sports teacher experience, which is at 7.24, which is 4.85 lower than the state average of 1209. So
Josh, those are years experience. Is wondering,
yeah,
years of service.
yeah.
Exactly why we're a charter school.
And then just below that in the general purpose grant box, it asks about the 25 and the 4,500. Those are just the numbers determined by whoever determined the state's part of the state school fund calculation.
Is that calculation the same for us as it is for a public school versus a charter school?
Correct. The next page is where it kind of touches on ADMW. And it's just kind of outlined funny. So if you look at like the top half of it, right, it gives us numbers to the 25, 26. But then you look at 24, 25, you don't hardly see anything. It's just down at the bottom half in the 24, 25. So it's just kind of weird formatting. Numbers are there. The 555 number you see in 25, 26 is the estimate of enrollment we are projecting going into this next year. We do have to make those estimations early on, and we provided that in a collection we have to provide to ODE due on January 10th. They do allow us to go in and make an edit to that if we feel is needed. But we have to do our best to make that estimation, 9 months before school even starts. So. Any questions on that?
I'm curious, how do you derive at the students in poverty, because it's such an increase over what you projected for for the current year?
So if I believe, yeah, we don't, but I thought the number was the
So
same.
that calculation is done by the state. We don't report anything on students with poverty. So all of these extra weights that are listed here, like students in foster care, remote high school, all of those determinations are made in the state school fund, at the state level. That's not something we estimate when we do that collection. We put in our real students, not the weights. We put in what we estimate for the student count for next year in each of the categories. We put in like the local revenue numbers, and then we estimate what we're going to have for high cost disability and transportation. All of these breakdowns of extra weights, those are all calculated at the state level based on the formulas that they have. So that formula is derived at the state level for the number in poverty. I'm not sure the details of how they break that down, but they have a determination of what poverty is at the state level.
And that difference is, if you look at the bottom right, you can see it is very similar. You see 35.81 in the top left, and the bottom right, 35.68. So it's just kind of weird formatting on that page that makes it hard to.
And that's because it's estimates, not actual. So next year, our 25-26 data will go into the actual, so it will go down to the charter school part at the bottom. But when they do the estimates, it's at the actual district level.
The first question, fees charged to grants, that is in relation to the indirect that I explained earlier. There was a question about the intermediate sources. So if you go to page 15. In about the middle of the page. You'll see we had 70,000 last year, none this year. Not typically a source the district received, but last year we received a grant from South Coast ESD. We're not anticipating that. And intermediate sources are described there. That's from our program budgeting and accounting manual. Revenue received as grants by district, which must be used for a categorical or specific purpose.
Does it have to be used within the budget year? for this
Within the
year?
budget year. Well, I guess unless the grant specifies longer.
So presumably those funds will have been spent by the end of this year.
Are we not expecting that since we canceled their services, so they're not gonna give us the grant?
It's not any retaliation.
That grant was a one-time pilot that was offered. I wish we were still getting it. Let me tell you, my budget is looking pretty poor this year, so.
Well, how come we're not getting that every year? They're still sawing trees down.
Oh, the federal forest monies,
Yeah. Why aren't we, do we get it every year?
they just,
The federal government didn't let it expire.
Yeah.
So talk to your representative.
Oh, they let it expire?
Yes, they let it
Oh, that's
expire.
wonderful.
They have let it expire multiple times over the last 3 decades, and then it's brought
That's
back.
always been brought back.
So, you need to talk to our representatives and get them to push for it back in Congress. It's been brought back before, so there's no saying that it can't be again, but there have been years that.
Yeah,
we
I
have
just
not
thought
gotten
it was just written in stone.
Yeah. No, it's a 5-year program and it sunsets. And so if they don't get on top of it before it sunsets, it's not rolled into the next year's budget. This is at the federal level, not the state
I
level.
know, he can
I can assure you, your representatives.
talk his way up. I hope.
there was a question about what other sources are, so I just again pulled from our budgeting and accounting manual. Those are your different 5,000 sources. The one you'll see most commonly in here is 5,400 beginning fund balance and 5,200 interfund transfers. This was, this kind of concerns about the FTE. This has a little bit to do with, I know, the difficulty in reading this document. And FTE not seeming to match. So if you do go to page 146. You'll see on that page, it shows one FTE, that at the bottom it says 3.82. That's calculating all of the 2000 function. So that's including prior pages as well. It's counting pages all the way back to 141. So it's FTE through 141 to 146.
Make sure that we spend all the money. Some of these places. We might put part person into that grant, for example. We might be 0.32 of a position, just to be sure that all the money from that grant is spent. And then the balance would be taken from general fund or a different grant. So funding FTE numbers are in part to do to portion of that person being funded in that revenue source.
And then this question about the change in what was allocated. This is our student body funds. For our student body. Because we mostly do stuff at a function appropriation level. We don't necessarily have to go into the details about what every student body account that there is what they're gonna spend. So I kind of do a placeholder for what all of them together are gonna spend. So for this, 21,000 went up to 150,000. But if you look at page 195. From last year to this year, you'll see that the total expenditure amount is now the same, 152, 150. Just in a different place. Any questions about that? I believe this was the last question, maybe one more. What is PFML, PLL, paid family medical leave? These are definitions, some definitions I took from the Paid Leave Oregon page. This started the year prior. Paid Leave Oregon is a program that ensures individuals, employers, and families of every kind have the time and support they need to care for themselves. They can take up to 12 weeks. 2 more for a total of 14 for certain situations. Sources on there if you really want to look into what paid leave is, but it's just another leave available for employees. Questions on that? Yep, that was the end of the slide. I'll stop sharing.
I ask you about, there's some categories that are listed salaries, but there's no FTEs behind them with them. Why is that?
Do you have a page number?
23.
Okay, where are you looking?
On the salaries.
Oh, because those are our additional. So additional stuff such as coaching doesn't have, so like primary positions, teachers, IAs, custodians, stuff like that have FTE associated. But we do extra duty contracts for like coaching. So if you're a coach, it doesn't have FTE associated with
Okay.
it. It's additional outside of a primary position.
Okay. Primary instruction, page 124. 10,000, but. Is that the same thing?
Hey, look at that one.
Got another one on page 118. Salaries for primary instruction.
Gosh, page 128, there's Title VI money. That's salary for classified confidential.
Is it because there's special revenues? Is that?
Are we expecting Title VI money?
No. Is it because they were in the special revenue fund?
I was asking Josh.
Oh,
But we're not expecting Title $6.
We are expecting those title dollars. There should be typically. FTE is still related in special revenue funds. So I'm gonna take a note. Let me,
there's one on page 70,
did you say 118?
118, and also on page 70.
118 was because of additional salaries,
What's positional?
additional, those extra duty contracts.
Okay, okay. 70.
Additional.
So you have a contract, but you still have to pay all those benefits with them?
It's still salary. It still has,
Pardon?
it's still salary, so it's still applicable to all state and
Okay.
federal payroll
Okay.
costs.
And as the meeting goes on, I'll look into that. I want and try to circle back to you this meeting.
Rachel, you said it was contractual, so are we, is that contract broken down that specific to salary, benefits, all of that, then presented to us as a bill? Or is that part of the contract?
No, I'm talking about classified bargaining agreement, licensed bargaining agreement, those kind of contractual obligations, not contracted service. Sorry.
Josh, should we go back to page 21? And you had mentioned that the PERS went up, right?
Correct.
Significantly. So, and it looks like, okay, so on tier 1 and 2, they went up. On tier 3, they went up quite a bit. Almost, what's that? 75%. On tier 3, so if we have the higher percentage of our teachers are new teachers, like experience wise, wouldn't they be under the tier 1 and 2, or how does that?
Tier 1 and 2 are the older.
They're the
more
higher,
original.
okay,
Yeah,
I see,
OpServe is the newest tier 3.
okay. Got it. It's the opposite. And then on the same page, we have managerial classified, 0 this year projected. And administrator is 77,000. Was that just moved around? What happened there? Because there wasn't anything.
Sorry, what page was that?
Same page, 21, account 113.
Vice President.
113 and 114. So on account 114, there's 0. But yet you do have some FTEs allocated to it.
To,
Oh, wait a
not
minute.
to
No,
one,
no, we
not
don't. It's 0.
114. Yeah, 0, 0.
Last year's.
Yeah, last year there was some.
So there's 0, 0. Did that get moved somewhere else? What happened to that position or that classification?
Most things like that are going to be a result of potential just reallocation of funds. But I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. That was, well, again, we can't get too deep into it, but that was resignation. So a resignation in the
And then-
district.
Okay, and then not filling that position again. Okay. Or replacing it
It was, yeah, it's being fulfilled, the role is being fulfilled and.
in other areas. And then what was 113? Is that a new role?
Should be.
That is a new role,
For the coming year?
correct, 25-26 year.
Generally, where does the private source contributions come from? I've seen that a few times.
It could be from an individual. I forget, I'm terrible at pulling up the specific examples.
I do have one you're
I
thinking
was
of.
gonna say, let me give some broad ones. I like to use our budgeting and accounting manual to just give you specific definitions from what I go from.
Can we ask some questions?
Yeah.
Page 26. Was a big increase in the salaries.
Yeah, resource road life skills program,
Why?
because we're not contracting those services anymore, so we have to pay staff to provide it within the district.
Was that part of that 600,000?
Yeah.
Okay. Attendance services on page 30. That must be a new position. You have it? 30.
Yeah,
It's just a reallocation of staffing based on resignations and trying to fit within the budget that we have. So you're going to see some of the positions moved around to meet the needs.
So 31, page 31, counseling services. Probably covered someplace else then.
They're covered in the grant.
Okay.
Were they, getting back the, library? Or
so there are some positions in here, again, right, we're making an estimation kind of on a hopeful level. But with declining enrollment, there is concerns of sustainabilities. Especially, you never know what the state's gonna roll out, right? We didn't anticipate $250,000 PERS increase. There's federal concerns with grant money and everything, right? So there is some positions that may be within this budget that we are going to have to monitor carefully until we know a better idea of what's going on.
So was that a yes or no on that?
It is within the budget, but I can't speak to whether Resport's gonna bring it back or not. Like I said, just because position is in here. For this year, there is one-time funds, and for the most part, for those one-time funds, I tried to put them in one-time places such as transfers. But if our state school fund is declining every year and our salaries and associated payroll costs are increasing every year, we won't necessarily be able to bring every position within this current budget in.
Josh, maybe you can have John speak to how he can get pretty creative sometimes in a good way about what you can do with, the dollars that have been allocated and how you watch the budgets to see, for example, the library position. You wouldn't necessarily put someone there if you weren't anticipating having long-term funding for the position.
Yeah, generally speaking, we're not going to put a position against money that's not going to be sustainable. When all the ESSER money came in through COVID, we knew right away that was a lot of one-time money and try to do more one-time purchases with those dollars because like our $252,000 this year, we have zero intention of seeing it again. And staffing a positions against dollars that are not sustainable won't make sense. I think the question generated around library. The library is a valuable position and vital for students to be able to get in there. But looking at the whole picture of everything that we're trying to do, it'll probably have a higher level of priority. It's not one that we did this year. Will we be in a position in the future to bring it back? I certainly hope so. But until we can see a clear pathway forward, we see that this looks like a sustainable stream of money for us to use for a position, we're not going to make decisions. We should, we don't want a person in there and either on and back and on, and the students being affected by that. Services, yes, services, no. we want to be as consistent as possible, and that requires the ability to feel confident in the dollars, either guarantee it or see the money in the bank.
And again, how long of a time frame would that be? You wouldn't want to have someone, I mean, that would be nice, come in the last half of the year when you got your money, they could do that.
Good.
But I understand what you're saying, if it's gonna be continuing with funding.
I would want to see the money. When the Student Success Act and the Student Investment Acts came into play, those have a high amount of their money coming from cat tax, corporate taxes. And they found a tax source at the state level that they were going to fund this new grant source for us in school districts. And we all began to start imagining, okay, well, we understand that's going to be relatively sustainable. What can we do as an addition to school programs? And we saw a lot more school counselors and social emotional learning and positions, because people could really envision the long-term, year after year tax going on, funding a grant from the state that they're saying is going to be held consistent. It fluctuates, but relatively where it's there. That's the kind of thing we want to put new positions in when it's possible.
Have you been able to do that with some other positions?
This year, most of our savings and workarounds have been from bringing contracts from our ESD, other sources back in-house.
Yeah.
And making local work for our people. It hasn't been because of new dollars necessarily being realized. If anything, we know our revenues, because of our enrollment, are going down. And so trying to be more conservative with what we're purchasing and keeping as many of our people working as possible within that money.
Thank you.
Just a sort of a general question about what's happening at the legislative level of the state. Have you seen, and I don't hear about it, so it's hard to go find it. Have we heard if they're in this cycle, if they are going to look at, I think what I heard described as a very antiquated way of funding schools in Oregon? Are they looking at reworking how funding is done? Is there any legislation that will make a positive impact, or did they not even bother to fix the problem?
No, and as a superintendent group, last year when all of us are starting to realize declining enrollment was a reality, Oregon has 30,000 fewer students than we did before COVID. The conversation came up on maybe we need a better formula, one that doesn't rely on students, because there's 30,000 fewer students. And at the from ODE, they're pretty clear that paying us per student is the fairest way to ensure that Portland doesn't do better than small rural Oregon does. And that a student in Portland is worth the same as a student in small rural Oregon. So using that equality, basically standard of this formula and paying per student is something they're really set holding. There doesn't seem to be a
They're not looking at alternatives to how we.
now, one of the things that they talked about they were going to make changes to was raising special education caps from 11% of your population to 15% of your population. In wintertime, when the forecast of the state economist was really looking good. We have a new state economist this year, and the projections we've been getting are a lot higher, more money being available. The money that the legislatures thought they had going into session has disappeared because of federal concerns impacting cap taxes and other things. They went from a number start a term to $800 million less at the entire state, all areas of funding. So what we went in lobbying for an improvement in special education cap, moving from 11% to 15%, that's pretty much off the table. Anything that is new would require a new funding source It's pretty much gone away. Two things that we're still hearing most certainty about is they're very confident they can hold us at the 11.4 billion. That number came out early, and that is a priority to make sure they fund schools at that base level. And really, it's a base level. The other one that they're looking at is the legislation for the PERS reform. I think Rachel pointed out that, it was Josh, that we had over 6% PERS increase. This PERS reform would knock it down 1.5 percentage points, so it's about 4.5% by the time it was done. So those are the two things that would be positive financial pieces out of the legislature that they're hanging on to. Any kind of early childhood reformation, sped cap reformation, high cost disability, those things are kind of sliding away as the reality of the revenues that they're dealing with is kind of slipping away from them. That's a general sense I'm getting.
And thank you, I appreciate that update. And one of the things that we know here is that we have a much higher sped population than, say, 11%. Ours is around 22. 21, 22, 21. So we know that we have, you know, an extreme condition for what we're actually budgeting for and what we're, so we have, you know, get very creative about that. We're funded for 11% and we're at 21.
Did have a couple responses to questions you asked earlier, some more specific examples of the 1920 contributions would be like REEF, outdoor school, and like scholarship. And the no FTE on that Title V, that one's a very small funded part of Title. There are concerns, and Title is federal, as we talk about, there's concerns. There was a number thrown around for a while, to anticipate about 20% less for federal, 20 to 25% less for federal grants. So while I anticipate there's still a likelihood that we'll get that one, I didn't designate FTE to it because that one is a little uncertainty compared to our tiny one that is a much significant. Hundreds of thousands compared to 10,000.
So in other words, if we get the money, he's gonna put FTE in there, but if we don't get the money, then the position is still secure in other resources.
Okay. Nursing on page 33, nurse services, and then 143.
Create allocated.
Yeah, but you also doubled it.
So 33 and then what?
Yep.
143.
That is the amount of FTE the school has. It's 2 FTE and nurses. One at each building.
Do we want to talk about the cost savings just in this last year, bringing those in-house?
Yeah, the last 2 years, it's gonna be hard for me to remember exactly. I have to look at last year's.
400,000 range.
40, like 40 total savings for the two positions to be brought in-house, but
40,000. Okay, so
but significant savings.
yeah,
Yeah, the district has brought in, like I said, with life skills, nurses was one of the ones. All these moves the district is doing from contracted services to in-house has been, a good savings for us. And you guys have better remember me, 40,000 sounds about right.
Yes. Previously, we had one in the quarter charged to grant and 0.75 in the general fund, and we were able to move both into the for next year. That's why the 0.75 in the general fund is gone and the FTE and cost is higher in the grant funds. Previously, we had 1.25 FTE in the grant and 0.75 in the general fund, and now all of it has been moved into the grant.
Okay.
No
Okay,
impact on the general
all
fund.
right.
And I would like to share also that we, as a district, can't move all of our contracted services from an ESD to the district. And the reason for that is because ESDs by law have to spend 90% of their state school fund and local property taxes on districts. So Reedsport gets an allocation amount that is set aside for them at the ESD that they can use to purchase services. So if they bring all of the services in-house, then they don't have advantage of that allocation of ESD funding. So that's why there are still some contracted services, but trying to not have to pay more out of pocket than what the allocation is the goal that reads.
We've been around the 300 to 350 mark, has been our portion of what we needed to spend.
Yes, correct.
Page 44, what are fiscal services? Is that you, Phil?
I am contracted services. But within the district, yes. It just has to do with business services within the district.
Just never seen the breakdowns that you do. They're quite extensive. The W services and how you break them down. Different people, so.
Yeah.
Some people's paychecks, some people's paychecks could show their money, but it shows from 3 different sources because this background, the one with the John Horn. All adds up correctly, but again, to maximize the grant funding as much as you can, save as general fund as much as you can. Then so you have that flexibility. And grants are often so specialized what they require spending to be on. Dividing it on those specialized positions happens pretty frequently. Yeah.
Well, I see a lot of pink flags, Karen. Do you have other questions over there?
Me?
Yeah, you're
Oh,
Karen, right?
yes,
Okay.
but, yeah, but a lot of them came under the bracket of your reallocations of everything. So, some of them, it just may be like this one is, this one is a grant, I think, Carl Perkins. Was he somebody from here? What, do we know anything about it?
Carl Perkins grant is a federal grant for CTE. So I'm sure he was somebody.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't know who it is, but it's a federal, yes.
Okay, all right,
It's a massive federal.
okay,
Yeah, sure.
okay.
He was a great guitar picker,
Was it what?
great guitar picker.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Trump take that money away, I wonder.
That's a question about my-
The federal government. take
Carl
that.
Perkins is a grant.
Okay,
By somebody else. I don't know the ins and outs of it. Well,
It could potentially fall under part of our federal concern. I don't think there's been anything of that kind specifically yet, but it could, depending on how far they want to go with federal stuff.
The Perkins grant is a consortium grant that is housed and managed at the ESD, and we have not received allocations for the Perkins grant for next year, the next biennium yet. They tell us to assume flat funding for the Perkins grant. And federal allocations should start becoming available on May 30th, I believe, is the latest I've heard.
That's the latest I heard.
Take a break. Anybody need a break?
Yes.
Oh, we will take a break. Let's take it right now.
But she defining her needs first.
All right.
I think I have one more question. What is systems analysis services?
What page?
Well, they're, page 54 and page 146.
That is technology department.
Okay.
That's technology, like the top 3 rows, that's technology staffing. So technology department staffing for our technology.
Which is for us old timers, please tell me what that is.
People that help us make our computers go.
Huh?
The people that help us make our computers go.
Oh,
It's,
All right.
it's a big job.
It is a big job.
and it's more like you just reallocated from one area from the general fund over to the special revenue fund.
Yes, and there was resignation in that category as well.
Pardon?
There is a resignation in that category as well.
Oh, okay.
Reallocation and
All right.
So, Josh, question. I love the spreadsheet for this current year on, and it's broken out, summarized under the accounts. Are we able to get a summary of accounts based on this projected budget?
it is possible. It is a very time consuming task. So I wouldn't be able to like easily produce it this year. If, I guess if we go to a second budget meeting, I could take it into consideration, but I don't know in that timeframe. I could. And for future years, I would have to pass that on to your future business manager. As it will not be me.
Okay. Do you have any more questions, or did we want to talk about some of our, maybe setting some goals or some recommendations for our superintendent?
I had a question. John, with your salary, did you have to split it for the time you were over in the high school in Highland? Were you, the principal for a while over there, or?
Principal with Highland, but I'm not getting a salary for that.
Okay.
Salary.
Okay. So are we, gonna be getting, it's designated though, that salary for the new principal?
What new principal?
Are you gonna get a new principal, or you're the principal?
I'm the principal right now, I'll be the principal next year. Maybe after 2 years, we'll discussion about that, but right now, the trajectory, I'm just gonna keep there.
So you're wearing multiple hats? That's a big multiple
A lot
hat.
of people in this right now, as we have kind of consolidated our workload down, a lot of people are picking up new tasks and using new elements of their jobs. A lot of people are working hard right now, so
Yeah,
that's just part of how we are surviving, is by people kind of redefining how they do their work and how they get the work done that it needs to be done.
they're doing 2 jobs right now.
Right now, and there's a whole school of staff and support staff and office and the vice principal, and
Gotcha.
we're all, I think Highland is using Highland as an example. They're down a good half dozen staff from last year. I think the high school is similarly. We're a little bit more this next budget. And we just having redefined all the things get done today that the kids need to have happen so that school see that learning is the outcome.
I understand. Thank you.
We hear great things about elementary school, so thank you.
Yeah, I can't flog you.
Graced out.
And it-
Back when they're long.
okay,
As you were
do you
saying.
have any other questions or should we go to community comment?
Before we go to community comments, I did forget, sorry. In this, there was a transfer piece that I forgot. So there isn't a page for it. If there was a page for it, it would fall between 220 and 221. Fiduciary fund for 200,000.
And we have to designate that transfer.
Have to designate that transfer. I have the expense in the general fund. I just forgot to put the other side of it in the other fund. So it's part of the 701,000 in transfers that you see. But also what it will do is it will increase your totals on the last page, pages 229 and 230 by 200,000 respectively.
And what page? It's going to increase it?
The grand totals of the entire budget, the last two pages.
Okay. 200,000?
Yeah. So it makes it 16 million and 66.
And where did you say the 200,000 is coming from?
It's a budgeted transfer, just like our budget transfers for capital projects, curriculum, technology. That's coming from the general fund to a fiduciary fund.
And what would be the function number for that?
Function number as a revenue, there won't be, it'll be 650, 5,200. And expense, it will be 650, 7,000. 820.
On page 55, there are general fund transfers already budgeted, for transfers out 701,000, like Josh mentioned. To make a balanced budget, you also have to balance your transfers. And so he has the expenditure side, but missed the revenue side, which when you put revenue in a different fund, you also have to have the expenditures in that fund. So that's why there's the extra $200,000. It's already part of the budget. It's just where that money ends up was missed.
We'll just do it as planned as part of our final adoption.
I'm done. Okay, at this time, we'll open up to community comments. Thank you, ladies, for being here.
Request sheets.
Okay.
Page 11, under building services, there's other non-instructional professional or tech services. And it's jumping from 45,000 to 214,000. Is there like something that we're gonna have to purchase, or is that a reallocation of funds?
We just have more funds in there because it'll be our second year of doing a transfer in there. So just allocated more to 389 is pretty broad in what we can do in there. So just allocated more to that area.
Repeat that again.
So we have more funds in capital improvement now, Fund 410, because it's our second year of doing a transfer into there. So that increase of 45,000 to 214 is for the most part, basically just because we have more funds in there, and that's just where I put it. 389 non-instructional, professional technical services, that's like most businesses you have come out to do like work for you and stuff like that.
So that's pretty high. Are you saying?
Yeah.
So is it for, are you able to later move it out of that fund if it's needed elsewhere? And is this the funds that we will get each year?
So we are wanting to put a significant amount of money into capital. Because there's a significant amount of work that needs done to these very old school buildings. Heating, I know, and I think John can speak on the projects a little bit more. He knows the buildings a little bit better, but heating, I believe, is an issue within the buildings. So doing mini splits to get heating for rooms and stuff like that. Just doing, I think, a couple rooms costs 40,000-50,000. So costs a significant amount of money to get the work done. And old buildings unfortunately only continue to deteriorate. So we're putting a stable amount of money into that fund every year so we can at least try to maintain this repairs that we need to do on the buildings. And if we can do additional, that's, fantastic.
But that'll continue, you'll still might contribute more for projected other projects too, for the following year.
Absolutely.
That would be the place.
In the previous school board meeting, we heard discussions about trying to add on a facility at Highland that was more community based and a gymnasium. That was a big project. At this rate, we won't get there with these kinds of dollars, but you have to have a place and you have to have something to start. Get architectural work done if we were able to land a bond or a grant or a donor. I mean, you have to have money, and the day-to-day, the roofing, and the heating and cooling are the two big ones that just always go south on us. Just when we have stuff settled, there's a new leak. So those capital dollars, they're always expensive projects, and they are never predictable. I don't have to time them all after I retire, but I'm lucky.
How's the boiler doing at the high school?
So
How's the boiler at the high school doing?
it's fine.
I have a next one.
Yes.
Okay, on page 193 for senior high instruction, there is consumable supplies. And that is jumping from 21,000 to a little over 150. I was wondering if I could just get maybe like an example of what consumable supplies includes, like is that paper, ink, or is that other supplies?
So this was something touched on a little bit earlier. This is student body funds.
Right.
So, yeah, consumables does. They're mostly anything that has short shelf life. So it can be food, it can be paper, it can be prom supplies, it can be any sort of activities. And the reason why you see it there is instead of allocating an amount to each student body account, which there's a bunch of, trying to work all that out. We budget at a function level. So this year kind of has a main placeholder, that's where I put it. But if you look at page 195 for student body fund, see that from last year this year.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
Thanks.
Mrs. Adams? You good?
Accounting is fascinating.
Come join us.
Voluntarily follow you. Thing you want me to join. As a nurse, all my math is done. A machine.
the big change from healthcare to this.
So, Josh, if we're able to get it as summary on this projection, that would be great. Be able to do that. And I guess at this point, we need to discuss whether we're gonna have another budget meeting, is that correct?
Or if we're able to
Yeah, right.
make a decision.
Based on tonight.
Can I ask you a
Information.
clarifying question? So that report that you're looking at is the general fund cash flow. And so it's just a report that we give to the board based on the breakdowns of traditional funding in the general fund, which is pretty trackable.
Right.
But for our grant revenue and stuff like that, we can't, there's no anticipation of a monthly income or anything like that. So if you're talking about having a similar breakdown in the general fund, that's something that we could do, but not for the budget overall, because those numbers don't always reflect what's going to come in. So like, for instance, our 600 and 700 funds, we wouldn't be able to provide a breakdown of that because that's based on what happens in the school district, whether they give scholarships or not. But if you're talking about just the general fund, then that would be something that we could prepare.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? How is that useful?
How is that useful? Excuse me. So instead of having flip page to page to page, we're able to see just based on the functioning, the
But
account.
that's like
Your-
an annual, like monthly.
No, I guess
The
there's a
one
difference.
that you were showing?
Correct, that was just an example of
Okay.
what I was asking for. What I'm asking for is if you're, I think that Rachel did understand me. If we can get a summary of all the accounts at the end of this, so what all of these are made up of, because if you look at each page, you'll see like 113, for example, on various pages. So we can just get a summary of that at the end of that based on.
So that's what you were saying is not going to be feasible in the next.
It would potentially be. The general fund would be easier, would be difficult. That information is basically what I presented in the slideshow without like a month-to-month breakdown, right? Salaries.
Right, it doesn't have to be a month to month.
But if it's not month-to-month, that was basically what I presented.
So you have a slide on there with each of the accounting functions.
It might be helpful to circle back to it now that we've gotten the information digested, like, can you
Yeah, not by-
run through the slide again?
So
Slide there?
So the slides are based on the object code. So at the bottom of that general fund cash flow, it's separated by object codes. So he provided the breakdown in the general fund by object code in the slides. And the revenue is on the first page of the general fund, which would provide the information that's at the top of that cash flow form. So we would be happy to prepare another report. I just don't know if we were looking for something different than what is there. When we do the resolution for adopting the budget or approving the budget, it also has the breakdown by function for each fund within the budget. So we already do that in the budget process. So if we could get like more detail of what you're looking for, that's not already something that we do in the budget process, then we can probably put our heads together and bring
I think
something about.
You had a similar report last year that you brought up also as part of the slides that you presented, and it was broken out into each of your accounts.
So that would be the slide that has the salary, the benefits.
Yeah, because if we look at this slide, salaries, and you look at your page there, it should be in line with your salaries.
Which, do you want me to look at this one?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you're talking about that one and you're wanting it broke down like that,
No, it's not exactly like this, because
Okay.
obviously these are actuals that you've already, and with your 3-month projections. But I'm saying if we can just, like you mentioned, Rachel, just get the breakdown of each of the accounts just summarized as how they're projected in your budget.
By month or?
No, not by
annual?
month, just the annual.
Okay,
And you presented something like that last year in one of your slides.
Josh presented the slideshow last year, and this is the same slideshow that we presented with just updated numbers.
No, it was something that you brought up on your computer last year, and I wish I would have taken a picture or something of it.
Oh, boy. Me too. I wish I would have also.
Yeah, I can try my best interpretation of what you're telling me. I mean, these are broke down by the object, so that the only other way would be function level. So I could do it by function. And I guess we could try to research maybe what we pulled last year.
Well, the only thing I remember pulling up last year was the adopted budget resolution that has the breakdown by function, which is what we do to adopt the budget in June. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
So we don't prepare the adopted budget resolution until the budget is approved so that the board can adopt the resolution. So we don't have one for this year. So the one I showed you last year was the one from the prior.
Previous year.
I was gonna say, let me get one from a couple of years ago and show it real quick.
Are you able to show us last year's? Do you have that one?
For this year's?
Yeah.
I know.
Current year. Yeah, sorry, that's current year.
I do the same thing. I'm like, let's keep on track, trying to figure out. I'm already in next year because we're budgeting 25, 26.
I don't know if this is last year specifically. I just went to, oh yeah, 15,
that's
16,
20,
16,
25.
yeah, yep. This is last year's.
Okay. Yes,
It kind of looks like it. How do you say?
yes.
Yeah, that's super easy.
Now that we're speaking the same language. All right, so at this point, thank you, Josh.
Yeah.
Are we ready to adopt the current budget as presented, or do we want to schedule a meeting for our next date of May 29th? May 29th, 2025 at 4 p.m.
In 25th,
On May 29th.
that's what we have.
Are there any looming larger questions that are unresolved?
I'm comfortable.
What was that percentage?
So bottom line,
Online.
what you anticipate? Are we gonna be over or
Over on what?
the budget or how much are we lacking?
I feel good about this budget. There is a lot of stuff going on next year. Like I said, with the grants and stuff like that, but we have, anticipated those types of things. So for grants, we planned, like I said, for kind of the high 20 to 25%. We took that to heart. And we have what we feel is sustainable. With grants, you have to be careful how much salaries you balance in there versus the general fund. So we have reallocated to what we feel is comfortable. I mean, every year is difficult. You can only face as things have gone along, but I think what we have done this year, all the changes the district has done, all the great things the district has done. One of the easiest ones for me, just off the top of my head, is food service has done an amazing job on their food costs. And it's not just food service, the district staff, everyone as a whole has done a great job to find as many savings as they can, bringing stuff in-house, everything like that. We ended last year at 433, right, had the furlough. We're looking at a 1.2 million beginning fund balance and ending at the board's goal of 1 million, right? We have transfers in place. We have a lot of sustainable things in place, and administration and John are really smart with when to take action on this, right? So I do feel it is a budget that can handle some turbulence, right? There's always a level of degree that we might not be able to, but we have anticipated as much as we can.
So I will entertain the motion if we're ready to accept the budget as is, or we can schedule for our next meeting for May 29th.
I would make a motion that we accept the proposed budget for 25-26. Is that loose enough to do? I mean, can we do it that loosely? I mean, I know I have to read it, but yeah. But are we, it's sort of a test the waters. Does anybody want to stick around? Are we good? Okay, okay. So I will. Do I get to do, I mean, do it in full, correct?
Yes.
Okay. For the proposed budget committee motions fiscal year 2025 to 2026, I propose or make a motion. I move to approve the Douglas County School District 105 Reedsport School District budget for 2025-2026 fiscal year ending June 30, 2026 in the appropriations amount of $14,834,239.34 and unappropriated ending fund balance amount of $1,232,223 for a total budget of $16,066,462.34. Can I do them both together is what I'm saying? Yes, okay. And then part two, I move to approve the taxes provided for the proposed budget of one, a permanent tax rate of $4.37. How do you say this? 4.3788 per 1,000 of assessed value for the general fund operations, and two, a tax for bonded indebtedness in the amount of $721,572 for the general obligation bond series 2019 in the debt service fund. Did I do that to your pleasing? Thank you. Somebody's gonna second that. That makes Sheila Marshall seconding that.
Thank you. All right. So all in favor, raise your right hand. No? And opposed? Mr. Jones.
Yes, ma'am.
No, I just thought you said something.
Oh, I just answered her. I'm just opposed. I think we need to go through this a little deeper, and I think that, I have several questions, and I worked way through it. Because life gets in the way, and I'm not comfortable with all aspects of the budget.
Remember that part where I asked before about making a motion if we were ready?
I didn't get a chance to. You'd already made the motion, so.
I had a question.
I made a specific request.
Well, the majority voted for to accept it, so.
Please hold it.
Yes, but I wanted to know, then at our next meeting, we can't make any changes to it.
Well, we voted to accept it as
It
it.
goes to them now.
Yeah.
It's an idea.
There is no.
Put up with this budget.
They can make changes at the board level at the adoption meeting in June if they so choose.
But we've done our job. We're done.
Carrie, can she undo it?
Yes.
But
Budget is never set in stone, so there's still opportunity to change the budget if needed.
to me, yes, no.
Hold on.
Wait. Can we?
So Chairman Jones, at the June board meeting, this board would have to adopt the recommended budget. And you've got the opportunity in those next couple of weeks to finish going through the document, slide your questions ahead of time to Josh. We can be sure to get those answered for you so that you have an understanding, so that you can go into that board vote comfortable with the recommended budget that got pushed up to you and
But
as of answer.
If I come across a situation where I believe that it's necessary for change, it's gonna be impossible because the budget committee's already voted. So we have a budget. Been doing.
You have a recommended budget out of committee that it almost always goes through and asking questions before your board meeting. We can have just a tough research and prepare for you. We want you to fully understand what's going on.
It is not impossible to make changes to the approved budget before it gets adopted. The board has the ability to make changes to the approved budget prior to adoption. We just need to know what those questions are and the potential changes so we can prepare information for the board to make those recommendations at the adoption.
Yeah.
I've changed approved budgets lots of times.
Yeah.
It's a suit, die show. This is.
Well, at this point, I turn the meeting back over to Mr. Jones, board chair.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and your effort and all your questions, and I hope that unlike me, you got all the answers you wanted, and I'll call this budget meeting adjourned.